tell us about, as much as you can, about the story in the book, like what happened. It's called The Last 7 Days. It's about your brother's situation. Kind of walk us through your experience with that situation.
Sure. So I was living at the time in Omaha, Nebraska. My brother was living in Connecticut. He had come back already from serving his second tour. He had been home for some time. He had had a college degree, University of Connecticut. He was working at Sikorsky Aircraft, which is very prominent, huge location in Connecticut, working on planes, and kind of a generational thing. My uncle, my stepfather had all worked there for years. And he owned a townhouse, he owned a home, so he was engaged to be married. So everyone's like, wow, he's living the life, everything's great. And I had received a phone call on a Friday from his fiance, who I'd never met before because I didn't live in the state. And she said, your brother's in the hospital. And I said, well, what happened? She said, well, he got some pills from the psychiatrist and we think he tried to kill himself because he started acting erratically after taking these pills that we had to call and have an ambulance take him. So, I chatted with her, and after I hung up the phone, I said, okay, what should I do? And I kept trying to call. I couldn't get through to him. I didn't realize I had taken his phone away. I couldn't get through to the hospital he was at. The next morning, I sent him a text. I said, you better answer me. If not, I'm going to head over there, kind of an empty threat. I didn't hear back, and there was something in my gut that said, you need to go. So I looked at my husband. I said, I need to book a flight. And he said, nope, let's pack the car. And here we were. We had 3 children and drove 24 hours from Omaha to Connecticut.
Damn good husband right there.
Yes, he's amazing. And so when we got there, I showed up at the hospital and I'm looking around me and I can't believe I'm in a psychiatric ward. And they bring me up to see him. And my brother is over 6'2", a big burly guy, walks over with just this empty look in his eyes. He could barely talk above a whisper. And my heart just broke as I held him because I knew he was broken. And we talked for about 15 minutes. A friend showed up, which I was glad to get out of there because I just wanted to cry. And I was determined, okay, I'm going to do what I need to do to help him. And he was released that Wednesday, and I told them he was not ready to be released. They were concerned because he had a huge amount of guns in the house. He was a collector of guns. He would take them apart. He was really obsessed with guns. And that's what their concern was. So we had all the guns removed, but I said, he's not ready. But in the family meeting, he joked with them and laughing, and that's what he would do. And that's what a lot of people in pain do. They mask it with humor. Look at all the comedians that have committed suicide. Because
isn't that something else? What a great observation that is. That is a very, very true observation. Isn't that something? Yeah.
Yeah. And but it's crazy. The moment we walked out of that hospital, his eyes just dropped. He had a downcast look on his face, and it just switched. And that was Wednesday, and we continued to stay together for the rest of the week and try to get him some things he would need it as we were ready to go home. And we already had it planned out that Sunday me and him were going to church together. I was going to do groceries, clean his house, and then head to make the trip back. And that didn't happen. I knocked on his door. He didn't answer. And I said, okay, I'm not going to force him to go to church. And I went into his office and started working. And a few hours later, my son, who was 11 at the time, walked in the room. And I said it was nobody but God that shielded him from seeing my brother, who was already dead, for hours on the floor. Mm-hmm. And he calls out to my husband and he says, Dad, I think Uncle Kenny left. So my husband said, well, bring the dog downstairs. And my husband went and called out my name, and I was 3 levels down. And so I knew, just hearing my husband's voice, I knew. And I asked my son later, I said, how did you know Uncle Kenny died? He said, well, Mom, when you ran up the stairs, you said, please don't tell me my brother's dead. I don't even recall saying that. Mm. And I went to go in the room. My husband said no. And I said, no, I need to get in here. And my husband's a big guy, pushed him out of the way, ran in the room, and it was too late. My brother probably had passed away about 12:30, and this was now 12:30 in the morning, and this was now 11. So, I mean, just hours had passed. And it literally just changed me as a person, from having somebody I love and always being that mothering protection that I felt, even through the funeral, I had to make sure that people knew there was more to him in his life versus how he went out in his death. Because, people think suicide is weakness. They think suicide, you gave up too easy. And I used an analogy the other day, with the actor that just passed away, Chadwick. And I said, he was this great actor. He just seemed like a genuinely nice person. Everyone liked him. He was educated. And when he died, people were heartbroken. But when they found out that he had been sick with cancer, it's like, oh my God, he became a hero. It's like, how is he doing all of this? And he'd been sick.
Yeah.
Well, you have people that are just like Chadwick, but maybe their issues, mental health. And they succumb to suicide, and they're not being called heroes. They're being called weak. So, it's just so sad that you said stigma, but I am happy that there is more dialogue going on to bring more awareness to it.
I cannot believe I got a little bit of a chill bump there when you were talking about that, because I've never heard mental illness described that way. And I could not agree with you more. When somebody passes, you were talking about Chadwick Boseman, the actor, who died of colon cancer, and he kind of kept that from everybody until the very, very end. And you're right. People looked at him like, what a guy. I mean, this guy was so positive. In the meantime, he's fighting stage 4 colon cancer and nobody knows about it. But what's the difference between having, some sort of cancerous growth in a part of your body and having some sort of cancerous thoughts going through your head? And just like you said, mental illness can be the cause of death, just like cancer could be the cause of death, or any other disease, because it is a disease. And man, what a great way to put that. So let me ask you, so there was one attempt, and then shortly after that, there was a successful suicide attempt. During that time frame, how many days went by between the first attempt and then the actual suicide?
Well, it was all in the same week. So the first time that Friday, and what he told me, and I don't know if this is the truth, and he said, I honestly wasn't trying to kill myself the first time. He said, the medicine the doctor gave me, I actually started to like myself. And that just broke my heart.
Yeah.
He said it was explained to him that his brain had a malfunction, that the part of your brain that has joy, happiness, that it wasn't working for him.
Yeah.
So he said when he got this medicine, it was like candy. I finally felt good. He says, I looked in the mirror and I liked what I saw, and I wanted to keep that feeling because I hadn't had it in so long. So because he took so much, then that's when he ended up in the hospital. But then that Sunday morning, so that happened on Friday, we got there Saturday, and then he died the following Sunday. So that's the 7 days. That Sunday, that genuinely was an attempt. His fiance had broken up with him that week. She just couldn't take it anymore. The erratic mood swings, just everything. And I totally get it. And that was definitely intentional, because he even wrote on his hand to be buried next to his best friend. And part of my brother's guilt was, aside from the war and what he saw, was his second tour was a voluntary tour. And he convinced his friend to go with him on the voluntary tour. And his friend was married, had children. And a week before they were due to come home, his friend died in combat.
Oh my God.
So that was my brother's best friend. So that was just like, it should have been me. It should have been me. To the point that when my brother passed away, we didn't even realize he actually had a huge life insurance policy to go to that family. And, the wife who knew my brother so well, and she was so devastated, she couldn't attend the funeral. It was still too raw from her own husband. That was about 1.5 years had passed, but she came to see us, and, here we were to be able to inform her of this. And she just broke down. She's like, that's who your brother was, always taking care of people. And, it's sad when you give and you give, but you're empty and nothing's filling you back up. You replay that story in your mind.
Yeah.
And that happened to me. Because the night my brother died, I heard a large thump upstairs, and it was actually when he fell. He broke a table and fell on the floor. And I carried the burden, well, if I just went up there to see what was wrong, he'd be alive. That's not the case. I mean, even the EMT said it was just too gone at that point. And that kept me in bed after we went through the funeral, everything kept me in a state. I started getting depressed.
Yeah.
And, I finally went back to work. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I would come home, I would drop my pocketbook, I walk right to the room, walk right past my kids. I figured my husband would feed them and literally lay in the dark.
Yeah.
And what broke it was my husband came to me one day and he says, okay, we can't keep having you do this. So thank God for him that he didn't let me stay in that cycle where some people would have been like, oh, well, she has to get through it. It got to the point like, yes, we need to mourn and grieve, but this was becoming a bit more.
For sure.
So how do we talk about it? I said, I got up and I said, okay, let me find a group. I need something. And that's part of how this book also was birthed because there was nothing I can find for siblings. Everything was if your spouse passed away by suicide, if your child passes away, if you're a parent. And siblings have such a unique dynamic. I mean, there's secrets that my brother and I never told my mother. She'd kill us to this day, if she knew, right?
I have a younger brother too, and we're the same way. I mean,
Exactly.
my younger brother, we have secrets that we will never tell our dad.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and I needed that from that perspective. So that's where, I went to a group. It was interesting being in that environment, and I saw that people were really stuck in time. It was exactly a month to the day that my brother had died that I went to that group. And afterwards, the facilitator, she said, when did you say that he passed away? And I said, it's a month today. And she says, oh my God, she said, you're so much further than those that are even here. I mean, but it was traumatic. There was people there that have had 3 people in their family die of suicide. And, my brother passed away by pills. I mean, not that there's a better way, but, when it's gunfire and I mean, all these other traumatic things. And I realized, I said, you know what? I have to find a way to help people not get stuck in that place.
Yeah.
And talking is good, but we want to talk so we can move you in a better direction. Are there days that I still cry? Absolutely. I can tell you, and I haven't told anyone this. My book, I haven't read the published copy. I don't think I can.
Wow.
I read an excerpt of it. I haven't been to my brother's gravesite. He's buried in Connecticut. That's one thing I can't do. And, my mother and I got into it one day because, she lives in Florida, and when she goes to Connecticut, and I said, I don't want to remember him that way. So I think everyone has to find their own way of coping. But at the same time, I think, pain produces purpose. This was a deep rooted pain. And how can I help somebody else that maybe they won't even have to go through this route because they can help their loved one?